So, the musical Hamilton. Any fans in the house? Any fans? Anyone seen it? It's in Seattle right now. Anyone going to see it? You will? You will? John, I know you're going to see it. You did see it, yeah. Oh man. I'm still hoping to miraculously get tickets to see it. In our car, everywhere we drove in 2017 was the year of the Hamilton soundtrack in our car. My children will forever know every word to that soundtrack, even those they do not yet know are swear words. So Hamilton is close to my heart. But there was another musical that captivated the attention of our country in 1996. And when this musical came to Seattle on tour in 1998, my friends and I, we were in college at the time at PLU, we waited in line overnight to get tickets, $20 front row tickets, multiple times. And we sang the songs, and we obsessed over the lyrics because it was a musical that put front and center issues that were finally coming into the spotlight. It placed LGBT folks and addiction and the AIDS epidemic at center stage. It was no Hamilton, right, Don? But it was similar to Hamilton in that its innovation musically, it was trying to shift Broadway into the sounds of the current pop culture, in addition to just mainstreaming some of the political and cultural hot issues of the time. Do you know what that musical was? Yeah, you do. Anyone else seen it? You seen Rent? Yay! High five. So Rent, if you may have seen it or know about it, but Rent follows 1 year in the life of a group of 8 friends who meet in New York City on Christmas Eve. And in 1 year, so much life happens. This bohemian crew of creatives, they're all trying to make it. They're trying to make rent, right? Trying to be able to have enough money to live and afford New York. But they are also living with a death sentence, whether their own or that of their friends, as 4 of them in this group, Roger, Mimi, Collins, and Angel, all live with HIV/AIDS. And in their own ways, they each struggle to face who they are and wrestle with the families that they come from and the relationships that they're in and their health and their vocation and how much love they will risk under this death sentence. One of the lines that Mark and Roger sing together, Mark plays the part of like the tragic, starving filmmaker. He's hiding behind his like old camera all the time, like documenting their life, but also like distancing himself from their life too. So Mark, as well as his roommate Roger's the one he's the struggling guitar player who's trying to write that one song of glory before he dies. And the line that they sing together, it names some of the double meaning behind the show's title as they sing, "I don't own emotion, I rent." I don't own emotion, I rent. Ash Wednesday is a day that calls us to pay attention to lines like Mark and Roger's, to stop and take an honest look at ourselves, at who we are. And as we begin this season of Lent tonight and for these next 6 weeks, taking us to Easter Sunday on April 1st. But it's a time to be honest about who we are, who we're becoming, and to see if we are owning our emotion and our lives and our relationships, or just renting them. Are we just going through the motions? I have always loved Ash Wednesday. I grew up in the church, so it was something that was a part of my regular rhythm. I didn't get to skip school, though, so I'm a little jealous about that. But I've always loved it, the somberness, the whispers of death, the ashes, the kind of leaving quietly at the end. But by its very nature, this is intentionally a day that should be deeply unsettling, because today is about death, right? And there's nothing we like more than ignoring the reality and the inevitability of our death. And there are theories and research to support this, that we consciously and subconsciously deny death all the time. I learned about this in a class that I took in seminary. When I was in seminary, there were a handful of classes that after each session, all I wanted to do was like go home and have a beer or like head to In-N-Out Burger because I was in California. But because they were so just emotionally intense and draining, and the most beer-inducing class that I took was a class called Death and Dying. That's right, I willingly signed up for a class called Death and Dying. And in that class, I learned a lot of things. I dealt with a lot of my own things. And one of the readings that was most provocative was Ernest Becker's book, The Denial of Death. The Denial of Death. And as you might guess, Becker's core thesis is that our primary motivation, the why of human existence, what drives us, is that we do all that we can to deny that we will die. We try to fool ourselves in all kinds of ways and to hide how our bodies age over time and even how we surround ourselves with people who think like we do, because in doing that, it validates our own structures of belief and it helps us to feel like we are more infinite if other people are believing these things too, all supporting what he calls our vital lie, our refusal to acknowledge our own mortality. So Ash Wednesday is intentionally unsettling because it confronts our refusal to acknowledge our own mortality, invites us to say, I am going to die. You are going to die. We hold our children today knowing that we will not have them forever. We have a finite and unknown amount of time on this earth. That's why we put ashes on our foreheads in a few minutes, to remind us that we are dust. It is what we've come from, and to dust we will return, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But today is also about not letting this practice be corralled to just one day of the year. The invitation of the ashes on our foreheads is to let death stay close to us every day. In Rent, as the group of friends lives under a death sentence, in their own ways, they all break into a space of living a fuller life. There is such passion and creativity and generosity and joy and love that bubbles up from this crew, alongside the tears and the anger and addiction and anguish. There is so much life that happens in that 1 year. And there's also death that happens for them too. And if anything, that death sentence that was spoken over them and the ones that they love, that made that year that much richer than it would have been if it had just been business as usual, renting emotion, going through the motions, denying how finite their time is. And that's the counterintuitive place where this all rests. That holding death as a real and present, inevitable part of who we are and where we're headed actually makes life richer. The facades somehow don't matter anymore. We stop renting emotion and renting relationships and renting our dreams and going through the motions when we know it's only for a time. Ernest Becker, he says it this way. He says, in avoiding death, we ironically avoid life. Or to say it the other way, in embracing death, we embrace life. We see it in people like in Rent. We see it in people who are dying. Have you ever spent time with someone who is close to death? When we've been around people who are going to die soon, what did they talk about? Like when we're with someone dying of cancer and they know they only have a little time left, do they say things like, hey, you still owe me $37? No, like that's not what matters, right? What do they talk about? They talk about how much love they have. They talk about their great memories and revisit inside jokes and talk about what a joy it was to share a few years with this person and that person, and they review their life story. Special food is shared and special notes are written and gifts given, and even like bucket list stuff is finally attended to when it can be. There's no going through the motions when we let death come close. In embracing death, we embrace life. So my first invitation for us this Ash Wednesday is to receive our death sentence. To receive our death sentence. You are going to die. To hold the inevitability of death close to us. Today, yes, but always, as the well-known line from Rent names, there's no day but today. No day but today. We have no guarantee about tomorrow. So feel the urgency and gift of now in light of knowing that it won't last. But the story doesn't stop there. Because the ashes that we wear today are the ashes of death, but they are also in the shape of what? A cross. There's another time when we received a cross on our foreheads in that same place, maybe when we were very little. When was that? In baptism. And baptism is done in very different ways in different communities, and you may not be baptized, and that's okay. But often when people are baptized, after being splashed or dunked in the water, they receive the sign of the cross on their foreheads. Often the words are spoken, "You have been sealed with the Holy Spirit and marked with the cross of Christ forever." And whether an actual cross was made on our foreheads at our baptism, the promise is still there in the waters of baptism, and also for all who choose to follow Jesus, that we are marked for death. We live under a death sentence, but we are also marked for love. We are marked with the cross of Christ forever. I joke with my children about how that cross that's traced on their foreheads at baptism and that's retraced on their foreheads before bed by either Jason or me each night, that's retraced every Ash Wednesday. That cross is always there. You just can't always see it, but it's always there because it tells us who we are, that we belong to Jesus, because it's Jesus' cross that's on us always. It marks us as beloved. And that's what makes today, this Ash Wednesday, Valentine's Day mashup, is so poignant. Ash Wednesday is a day to remember what love is, and not the consumerized, over-romanticized, Hallmark, fluffy version that our culture tries to tell us what love is. I walked into Safeway yesterday, and it was like a wall of red and pink right inside those doors. It was flowers, cookies and cakes, balloons. It was like, it stretched like 20 feet in the air, just completely pink and red. It was kind of amazing. But there's so much more to love than red roses. And it is the Jesus version of love that tonight is about, and what Valentine's Day should be about, because the Jesus story is a love story. A story that we are bound to tonight, to bear Jesus' cross of ashes tonight. We let God draw us in again and label us and bind us to the Jesus' story of love, a story where we get to see what love can look like. Jesus shows it to us in everything he says and does, a love that echoes of the prophet Isaiah's call that we heard Greg read for us tonight. That a life of love is not the kind of fast or spiritual practice that means going through the motions or just buying red roses. Red roses are okay, but it's not just about red roses. But to put those words on the screen again, what Isaiah says, love is to break the chains of injustice, to get rid of exploitation in the workplace, to free the oppressed, to cancel debts, to share our food with the hungry, to invite the homeless poor into our homes, to put clothes on the shivering ill-clad, to be available to our own families, which can mean red roses too. It's okay. But that's love, yes? Then the prophet says, do this and the lights will turn on and your lives will turn around at once. And I love that. No more renting emotion, renting life. Love this way and your whole world lights up. Tonight is about receiving our death sentence and receiving our love sentence. That's the second invitation for tonight, to receive our love sentence, the love for us and the love that is with us in all the ways that we are also hungry and homeless and shivering and indebted, and to let our lives be drawn into that kind of loving action as well. This is like the short list of what a life of love can look like, and it is so much more than this too, but this is the story that we are marked by tonight. This story of love. And I don't know about you, but I hear Isaiah's words and I look at that list and man, I have a long way to go before that's my life, right? But that's the point. That's the point of tonight, of Lent, of this whole business of following Jesus. We never arrive. We never look at the list and go, oh, look, I'm doing all of those things. That's it, I've arrived, right? We're never done with that. There's always room to grow. And most of the time, I think we hear pictures like this of this life of Jesus, and we either kind of ignore it or we try to forget it because it feels like it's too far to go to live like that. But tonight we begin the 40 days of Lent. Lent, the word means spring. It means spring. Historically, it was a time of instruction and preparation for those who were to be baptized on Easter Eve and welcomed into the life of Christ, a time of drawing closer to God then through the 40 days. But we see Lent now as a time of spiritual spring cleaning, of letting the light into those dusty places that have been shut off and ignored and neglected, to let the lights turn on. And we do that by letting Lent be a journey of being honest about who we are becoming, right? Letting death and love seep in, remembering who we are as marked by death and marked by love. So my friends, this Lent, our journey at Salt House, we're going to hold these two invitations together, falling deeply into how death informs our experience of being loved and loving others, and how it is coming and dying again and again, that the lights come on, that we embrace life through that process. So we're going to say more about that as we kick off our Lent series this coming Sunday, how the Jesus story invites us into life and love by walking through death. Like, how does that work? We'll explore it all this Lent together. In Rent, there was this presence of death, this death sentence, and also such a visceral presence of love. That love sentence. And the provocative song that captured it all was the song Seasons of Love. Do you know it? As the cast sang of 525,600 minutes in a year, with all those minutes, how do you measure a year? What a great question, right? How do we measure life? How do you measure your life? What matters most? How do we keep score? Especially a life lived in the shadow of death. How do we measure it? So as we close this time, we are going to sing that song from Rent. And a reminder, too, as we sing this, kids will start showing up in the doorway, so they'll be kind of ushered in as we do this. But as we share in this song, sing along or let the words speak to you and ask you of how you are measuring your life. How do you measure life? And hear the invitation from Rent, and more deeply, too, from the Jesus story, to let love be the measure. To let love be the source. Let love be the life for us. This Ash Wednesday, this Valentine's Day, and always. Let's pray. God, we take this moment now to hold death close to us. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Thank you that we have today, this day, that we have life in its messy, imperfect, beautiful fullness. And thank you that we have love given boundlessly to us, love offered to be given away in all we do. In these moments now, we listen for you and let our death and our love sentences seep in as we reflect on how we measure our lives. May we measure them always in love.